Hello designers, welcome to your first at-home video lecture in the illustration unit. There may be more coming, but this one is just to introduce you to what illustration is before you start your first smaller project as we lead up to the big one towards the end of the semester. So let's first start by defining what is illustration, and here's our formal definition. It's a decoration, interpretation, or visual explanation of a text, concept, or process designed for integration into print and digitally published media such as posters, flyers, magazines, books, teaching materials, animation, video games, and films. In essence, what it is using art skills to create a visual picture of some kind that's going to go along with another intellectual piece of property. Typically it's writing, but sometimes it can be forms of music or film, but it's an illustration that accompanies it. So it's us using our design and art skills. So who or what is an illustrator? An illustrator, obviously, is somebody who makes illustrations. They specialize and use their knowledge of art skills and materials to create those illustrations for different publications. So there are some things that you should know about the career of illustration. Number one, for me, I consider illustrators kind of like the rock star of the art world because they can kind of do both. They are both really, really technically skilled in traditional studio art techniques and media, so they're really, really good at that, and at the same time they also know graphic design, and they work with graphic designers, and they can use graphic design principles. So they kind of are in a gray area all by themselves, where they're not really technically fine artists, they're not really technically graphic designers or commercial artists. They kind of live in a world between both. And because of that, it's usually only the best of the best who kind of aspire or become successful illustrators. They're also, not only are they technically very, very skilled and very knowledgeable in art and graphic design, but they typically tend to be highly creative people. They have to be outside of the box kind of thinkers. So they have not just that technical skill, but they have that imagination to go along with it. Again, this is why I kind of consider them the rock stars. What is unique to illustrators that is they do not have in common with graphic designers, but they do with fine arts, is that they do work to develop their own style. Where a graphic designer typically doesn't, they're a little bit more fluid in their style because they have different clients that need and want different things, versus an illustrator where people will seek out an illustrator specifically because of their style of drawing, painting, or digital creations. It's unique to them because illustrations are all about personality. They're not about simple replication or graphic design layout. They're unique, and so they want a unique kind of artwork to go with their product. Otherwise, they would just use a photograph, right? There's a reason they're going to art rather than a simple photograph or stock photos. One other thing that you should know about Illustrator is that they typically are not employed by a single employer. They work what's called freelance. So that's kind of like being a gig artist, where they're picking up different jobs here and there. They work basically for themselves. A lot of them open up their own LLC, so it's like they are their own business. So they're kind of employed by themselves, but they work freelance for other companies. Every once in a while you will find an illustrator that's employed full-time with, say, a newspaper or a company, but typically not. That's not very common. Within illustration, there are some specialized fields. Just like in graphic design, you can kind of specialize in logos or surface pattern design. Illustrators often kind of find a groove within a certain area of illustration. So some examples, but this is not an exhaustive list, there's more, but some of the most widely known ones are medical illustration, and you can maybe wonder why we do medical illustration when we can just use photos now. Well, it's because photos sometimes actually don't show a good, accurate, cleaned up sample of what they're trying to study or what is going into that text or the manual. So by drawing it, it kind of, well, not to sound gross, but it can take away all the blood, so you can see everything a little bit clearer. It makes things easier to understand, especially for somebody who's training to be a doctor. Also, you have fashion illustrators, where they're using their skills, often with a fashion designer, to help them see their creations before they actually even start creating them. They'll start first with the illustrations, and then they kind of start to pick out their fabrics. So they work with other designers. The one we're probably most familiar with is book illustrators and print media illustrators. So book illustrators can work in all different fields, but most of us are really familiar with children's books. That's an obvious source of employment for illustrators, is children's books and children's novels. But also, you will often see illustrations that accompany articles, both in print media and also online media. So they'll use those illustrations when maybe a photograph doesn't quite help us understand the story or the article. And then you also have some outliers, like artists who specialize in like gig poster or festival design, where again, you don't want just a photo in graphic design, you want a drawing to go with it. Just to highlight some important illustrators over the course of history, and there are many, many, many. These first two are probably considered some of the masters of illustration and the founders of the explosion in illustrators becoming a very dominant part of the art field and sought after. So you have Alphonse Mucha, who is represented here on the left, and you have Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, who is featured here on the right. You may have even seen some of their work or similar works. They were both part of the same movement in art called Art Nouveau, and Art Nouveau was a really interesting style where it was both in the fine art world, but it also trickled into interior decorating and industrial design. And in fact, if you still go over to France today, and specifically in Paris, you're going to see these Art Nouveau embellishes like on the signs for their metro station. It's all over Paris, all over Europe, because it was really popular at the time when those countries were rebuilding after the war. And Henri Toulouse-Lautrec was considered the father of the poster. So he was the first one who created and used printmaking methods that made his artwork easy to reproduce, and so posters were plastered around Paris, and that really wasn't common before Toulouse-Lautrec. Probably the most well-known American illustrator is Norman Rockwell, and I can almost guarantee you've seen some of his work. He worked in the mid-1900s, so he was very popular in the 1950s and 60s, and he was most well-known for his illustrations that graced the cover of the Saturday Evening Post, which I do not believe is even a publication that's around anymore. But he's well-known for this very charming, very aw-shucksy, stereotypical family dynamics of the 1950s, kind of like the glossed over, shiny, Leave It to Beaver kind of ideals. However, if you are interested, I would suggest taking a deep dive into Norman Rockwell, because he is much more than these aw-shucksy, golly gee whiz, super naive, non-confrontational image. He kind of has a history in the civil rights and even gay rights movement, so it's kind of interesting. You might want to dig a little bit in him. He's not as naive and wholesome as he might seem to others. Another one is Andy Warhol, which most people are familiar with Andy Warhol because of these Campbell soup cans, and he became a monster artist in the fine art world. He became super, super famous, super, super wealthy, super, super popular. But before that, he started out as an illustrator, and he worked for Vogue and other fashion magazines. And this is where you can see he had a very definite style to his work. He was abstracting it. You think to kind of like our DDAs, where he's experimenting and they're kind of quirky and weird. And if you're familiar at all with like mid-century mod design, these are very reminiscent of that late 60s, early 70s kind of explosion of mod design that happened in the United States and in Europe at the time. So he started out first as an illustrator. I think we're all familiar with these three artists, these three illustrators. So Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are, Where the Wild Things Grow. Sorry guys, I'm forgetting that. All three of these are unique because they actually created their own stories as well, and that's specific to children's book illustration. Most other illustrators are authors. Okay, this is very, very rare. But a lot of times you will see that children's book authors are illustrators and children's book illustrators are authors. Not always, but often is the case. So Maurice Sendak, And again, kind of had his own style. Eric Carle, who we probably are familiar with, A Very Hungry Caterpillar, he had a very unique style where he painted pieces of paper and then he cut them up and he collaged and he photographed those. So that was his style. He didn't work digitally. Actually, none of these guys work digitally. And then probably the most famous here, Theodore Geisel, which better known as Dr. Seuss. So what I would like you to do now is I'm going to have you stop this video, find the slide presentation attached to this assignment in Google Classroom, and watch this very short, it's like 5 minutes, on the golden age of illustration. And you're going to see it's gonna reference Andy Warhol. All right, so now that you're back, before we talk about going forward and your first project, I'm going to share with you just a little joke. Hint, hint, this may show up in a Google form quiz. But your question is, what kind of shoes do artists wear? Skechers. Get it? All right, so that's a mom joke for all of you guys who like those silly mom jokes and dad jokes. So what are we doing now that you have finished these 3 video lessons? So if you have not finished all 3, stop the video, go complete these now. So the basic illustration tools, that's one with the house. The paintbrush appearance one, that's where you're kind of doing switches of the paintbrush and learn how to load brushes, and then using the scanned image drawing. Make sure that you complete those. All right, so what we're doing with this, our knowledge of Illustrator and illustration, is that you are going to create a themed sticker sheet. So by themed, I mean pick an idea, whether it's fish or summertime or the holidays, anything you want, that you're going to create a variety of drawings that we are going to scan in, and you are going to illustrate and illustrate. You're going to add your color and texture and all of those things. The things you cannot do is you cannot do copyrighted characters, so no Disney, no Marvel, none of that stuff, no Rick and Morty. You also cannot do logo design, so these need to be original custom drawings. You'll also see here you can do some with text. For the drawing component, I don't want you to do the text, and I'll explain that in a second here. So the objective is that you are going to be creating, so your objective for this, like I said, is you're going to create a sticker sheet. The sticker sheet must have 15 stickers on it, okay? 10 of which, minimum of 10, have to come from the 10 drawings that I'm going to give you instructions on here. The other 5 should be simple or original illustrations that you're going to do from scratch in Illustrator. So, and they should probably be a little bit more simple. That's where if you want to do text, like in the last slide here, oops, I would do that in Illustrator. I wouldn't draw that, okay? It's much, much easier to use the fonts. Or this is what I mean by a simple illustration. These littler ones, the more advanced ones are complex. That's the ones that we're going to draw out first, and you're going to illustrate in Illustrator. Now, these little, nice little embellishments they have on the sticker sheet, those don't count as stickers, but hey, if you want to do that, do something to help unify the sticker sheet and make it look all cohesive, you can do that, right? So again, 10 stickers are going to be created from your drawings, minimum, you can do more if you want, and then a minimum of 5 are going to be done from scratch in Illustrator. Right? And then when we're done, you're going to get a sticker sheet. You're going to get an 8.5 by 11, which is a standard printer size sheet, full of stickers. So you could probably do more than 15 if you wanted to. Or we can print the same sticker sheet twice, so you get double the stickers. So here's your criteria and scoring. You have to do minimum of 15 stickers. Like I said, all 10 of your drawings must be used. Minimum of 5 original ones created from scratch. You have to use advanced brush tool options, such as changing the shape of the brush, so not just using those basic brushes, but loading some different ones, changing the appearance of those brushes. You also have to create texture on this, so we're not doing just flat fills and strokes. You're doing some texture either by using gradients, the object styles, the filters, and any other thing that you've learned, and that could be included using that brush tool to create textures. All drawings must be original and cannot be based on copyrighted material, as stated before. Here's how I'm going to grade it. I'm going to look at procedures. Did you turn it in on time? Did you follow directions? Your craftsmanship and effort. Did you use the class time well? Does it look like you took time? Does it look like you tried your hardest? I'm going to look at your use of Illustrator, so I'm going to look at your use of the brush tool and those advanced options, even like the drawing inside to do the texture, like you did in that last video lesson. I'm going to look at your creativity and difficulty. I am going to look at your ability to create texture, and then I'm going to look at repetition and unity. I want to circle back to creativity and difficulty here. Remember, your difficulty is based on your ability level. Some people have a higher ability level than others. I take that into account. What I'm talking about creativity is not just with your theme, but how you are developing your illustrative style. Think of the DDAs, how we are using those elements in different ways. I want you to do that with this. I want you to start thinking like a designer, not just a drawer. How do you take line, shape, space, color, texture to make something look more visually interesting? So the first step is what you're going to do after you're done with this video, which is you are going to draw 10 individual drawings that are part of your theme that you can use for your stickers. Each of these drawings need to be on their own individual piece of paper, and it has to be white copy paper or white drawing paper. It cannot be lined paper. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about these drawings. Here's some of the do's. Make sure that your lines are clearly defined, okay? So think about them kind of like coloring books is what I tell people. They should look kind of like a coloring book when you're done. Make sure that if you want to fill in a shape that you enclose it. So that makes you don't have any gaps in the line, because when you do that image trace, you're not going to be able to fill it. It's just going to flood. It's not an enclosed shape. You can have what are called open-ended lines, okay, where it will just flow around, but that's okay. They're there for detail and texture. But make sure that if you want a shape colored in, that it is enclosed in. When you're done with your drawing in pencil, I might add, then you will need to trace it in a thick black Sharpie. See me before you do this, because I will want to check your drawings before you trace it. Once you trace it in that black Sharpie, you're then going to erase all of your pencil marks. So make sure that you erase all your straight pencil marks, because if you don't, on those scanned in images, when you image trace it in Illustrator, it's going to pick up those pencil lines and it's going to record those when you don't want them to. You can add detail. But when you do, if you want to add detail like shading, do it with hatching, which is straight lines. If you're like confused what I mean by this, see me and I can show you some examples. Otherwise, just keep it open. Open, simple shapes that you're going to fill. Here's what you cannot do. Do not add shading. Don't add shading with the pencil. Again, you can do hatching, cross-hatching, and stippling if you know what those things are, but you cannot use shading like this. Do not do this, okay? Number one, I want you doing that in Illustrator. Number two, it's going to cause you problems when you try to color this in Illustrator. Also, don't fill in areas completely. So like I wouldn't take something and fill it flat black with a Sharpie. Again, you should be doing that in Illustrator. If you want something flat black, you'll fill it in Illustrator. Don't fill it on your drawing. I would be careful of adding too many fine lines in drawings, again, like this one here, or the fine lines here, because it's going to make it really hard to to image trace in Illustrator and to color. It's just going to cause you complete chaos. It's going to be really annoying. And then don't overlap any objects on your drawings like you see here. Put everything on its own sheet. So if this were me, even if I wanted to combine those as one sticker on the sticker sheet, I would still do them individually and then put them together in Illustrator. It just gives you a lot more control, and it makes it easier if you need to make changes. All right, so that's what you're going to do first. I want to quickly talk about the next step after the drawings, because you'll need this information. So once you are done with the drawings and you've shown them to me and I've approved them and I've taken them for scanning, you're going to set up your document. This is what your document needs to be set up as, 8.5 by 11. And you will have to place those 10 drawings. Those scanned images should be in the same folder that I showed you in the video. If not, I will give you some different directions in class, okay? But they'll probably be in that same scanned folder. And then I want you to have some fun. When you start adding your color in Illustrator and you're doing all those extra effects, remember texture is going to be really important. You're getting graded on that, so I don't want to see stickers like this. I want to see stickers like this. So you need to start showing me that you're starting to understand Illustrator a little bit better. So that's our key element. Our key principle is repetition. You need to repeat those common elements like color, shape. Number one, that's going to make your stickers look more cohesive, like this all belongs. Also, it's going to help start to show me that you understand style. right? So these are clearly a specific style. Also, feel free to do things like this. So see what they did on their sticker in the background? They printed a pattern. You can do that if that helps you kind of create the mood or the theme. We just got done with branding, so we know that mood is important, and color and texture and line, those all help establish a mood. So really lean into stylization. Have fun with this. I'm excited to see what you draw. Don't forget the punchline to my mom joke. It very well may show up in a quiz.